Hey, are you good, bud?
Yeah, no, I'm good. I'm all right.
You look pretty dehydrated. You need some water? I got some.
Yeah, no, I got some water in my pack somewhere.
Are you sure, bud? I mean, you're sweating like a pig, you know? I mean, that kind of looks like a winter jacket you got on there. I mean, it's kind of hot for that.
No, I'm good. It's not insulated. It's just a shell, you know?
I mean, I'm a little worried to leave you here, you know? You want to take off that jacket, you know, take some layers off?
How else am I gonna protect my delicate skin and my fragile base layers, you know?
Are you seriously wearing base layers? My brother in Christ, it is literally 95 degrees.
Look, dude, it's drip, all right? It's cool. I don't want to take it off. It's all I have. I'm nothing without it.
You know what? I think I can help you out. Come on, I got something to show you. I think I got just the thing for you. You like US Woodland?
M81?
Yeah, M81.
Ta-da!
What do you think? It's a field jacket.
Oh.
Oh?
Nothing. It's just, you know, I thought you were gonna show me something a little bit cooler.
This thing practically invented cool, all right?
Yeah, and I totally get that, man. But, you know, it's just a BDU. You don't look cool. You look homeless.
Just a BDU? This thing's perfect.
Yeah, but it's not upvotes on Reddit cool. I'm afraid to say it's not 1981 anymore. These days it's not about timeless form factor and practicality. Now it's all combat shirts, micro rigs, and f*** you. You want another low-vis plate carrier?
So you want drip, huh? I'll show you drip. You wait right there.
All right, it's finished. Oh my God, where have you been?
Try it on.
Oh my God, is this a Crye Field?
Why would I spend $400 on an overglorified BDU? That's called Raid Mod.
It's a what now?
That is the genesis of all the cool guy gear you see today.
Damn, how much did it cost?
All it cost me was a $20 BDU, all of the skin on my fingers, and a $400 sewing machine.
Well, it couldn't be that easy. I mean, it took you 3 months.
I have crippling ADHD.
Yeah.
Hey guys, Kid Creep here, and happy summer, right? Now, I don't just play around in the snow, I do also touch grass, so that's why today I want to talk about hot weather layers. Now, in the summer, of course, we don't think about layers, we think about stripping our layers from the winter and just stripping down to like shorts and a t-shirt. Now, in the winter, of course, we wear a protective shell, whether that be a hard shell or a soft shell, to protect our base layers, right? But in the summer, exposed skin isn't always a good idea, right? So having pants and a long sleeve is really good for, well, bugs, poison ivy, keeping the sun off your skin, right? Having a actual barrier, not just relying on sunscreen. Now, of course, a lot of people choose to wear something like a sun shirt, but the difference between something like a sun shirt and a shell is that the shell is actually going to stand up to doing things like bushwhacking, right? While I'm out here trying to get to a nice private location. And going back to bugs, I had Lyme. Well, I guess I have Lyme forever, right? And it sucked. Bug repellency and bug barriers is not just about having the heebie-jeebies and being creeped out by bugs. It's really a health thing. So when you wear something like this, it is going to give bugs a real barrier to have to get through. And the other thing is that you can treat something like this with bug repellency chemicals, right? Also, you lose a lot of utility when you swap out your big jackets and your really cool cargo pants, right? Having all those pockets and places to put important things is, well, important in some scenarios, right? So let's talk about the shell that I'm wearing. Now, this is really just a BDU coat. The BDU or DCU jacket is my preferred hot weather shell because they are so durable, they are so breathable, they add a little bit of camouflage depending on if you're creeping, right? Doing some stealth camping or milsim type stuff, or you know, you just love God's plaid, right? Nothing wrong with that. However, there are a few shortcomings of the BDU jacket, and I want to talk about those today. So immediately you'll notice that we have 4 pockets here on the BDU coat. We have 2 big ones down at the bottom, and we have 2 smaller ones up at top. And this left one is actually a little pen pocket holder, which is really cool. It's got a little sleeve on the inside for a pen. This is where you put your notepads, right? And you'll see that these are all buttons. And then here on the sleeves, we also have just buttons, right? So buttons are less than ideal in a lot of scenarios. They're definitely reliable, definitely field repairable, but they're not always the best thing ever, right? I love this thing, of course, it's a classic, it's a vibe, but I always find myself just wanting a little bit more out of it. So I'm gonna show you something else here. So this is what is known as Raid Mod, right? Specifically a Raid modded BDU. Now, I'm not gonna get too deep into the weeds of the history on this thing because it's really just a tale as old as time, right? Guys get issued kit and they have special needs, therefore they need special clothing, right? Now, back during the early Global War on Terror, Special Forces guys' kit was evolving faster than their uniform was, right? With the dawn of the plate carrier and you know, modern body armor, as well as a gun belt or a pistol belt, right? All that cool guy high-speed stuff that we all know and love today, their clothing was not working with it, right? The standard BDU coat was designed for, you know, the LBE or Alice belt that we all know and love. So the most important modification of the BDU coat was removing these bottom pockets, right? Those bottom pockets with that extra material and the flaps and the plastic buttons that sit right in your waistline, it's not super duper comfy, right? Now there is no standard Raid mod pattern. There's just a lot of different really cool variations, and that's why it's so fun to play around with it, right? I actually made this example here myself. I didn't have it sent off. I just had a sewing machine and I decided to take a stab at it. And it was actually really fun and really rewarding. So instead of just ditching those bottom pockets, guys started to look for a different place to put them. And well, where better than here on the shoulder, right? So then we started to see guys moving those bigger bottom pockets up to the shoulders and leaving these smaller chest pockets in place. And then as time went on, through a lot of trial and error, we ended up with something like this, right? These things inspired a whole new wave of modern tactical gear, right? If you look at something like the ACU uniform or the Marine Corps utility uniform, Crye, Beyond Clothing, Patagonia, all this stuff, they're all inspired by this thing, right? So one guy with a sewing machine and a dream can really make some waves. These were usually done by a guy on a Special Forces team who was skilled with a thread and needle, and I'm advocating for you to become that guy. Now, of course, you can have someone like Hub City Outdoors modify the jacket for you, or you can buy a modified one from them. You can also hunt for them on eBay, but there's really no way to prove the authenticity of it. So that's why I personally think that it's really cool to stay true to the original Raid mod and modify it myself. So what I'm advocating is for you guys to steal your mom or your grandma's sewing machine and then get yourself a few sets of BDU and DCU coats and start modifying them, right? And fortunately for us, Venture Surplus has sponsored this video. They give us a discount code so you can head on over to their site and you can pick up maybe 3 or 4 sets of BDUs or DCUs. They're so cheap that if you mess up, well, you can just try again and it doesn't really hurt the bank too hard, right? And the other really cool thing about Venture Surplus is that they actually tell you what kind of BDU coat that you're gonna get, right? They have 50-50 nylon cotton, they have 100% cotton blends, and the list goes on. Use discount code KitCreep, pick up a few sets, and just start learning a new skill, okay? It's good for you. So as you can see, what I did was I didn't just ditch those bottom pockets. I actually moved them up here to the chest and I put them at a more natural angle. And this is great for holding things like maps or E&E stuff like a VS-17 panel or fire building kits, right? Here up on the shoulder, putting those pockets up here makes them easily accessible no matter what you're doing, right? If you have body armor or chest rig over your chest, if you're laying out in the prone, like if you watch 9-Hole Reviews, you'll see he is always wearing a Raid Mod jacket, so that way you can hold your notepads and your calculators and all your really cool long range stuff in those shoulder pockets. So let's head on over to the studio and take a look at my examples that I've finished thus far.
Now, before I show you my examples, I do want to show you how I actually go about Raid modding a jacket. Now, I'm not going to teach you how to sew because that's something that you got to figure out on your own, but I am just going to take you along for the ride while I modify one of my buddy's jackets here. Now, of course, you don't have to do exactly what I'm doing here. This is just what my buddy requested and also one of my favorite styles, but I figured take you along for the ride, let you see what the process looks like. Now, let me preface this with, I am not a professional. I'm not showing you this because I'm the expert. I'm really just showing you this because if I can do it, so can you. Also, quick side note, if you're working on a jacket for someone else, try not to bleed on it. So for this example, step 1 is going to be remove all pockets. The bigger bottom pockets are going to be moved up to the chest, so we're going to remove all of the plastic buttons in order to make it more comfortable when worn under a plate carrier. Next, we're going to add Velcro in place of the plastic buttons on those pockets, we're going to be moving up to the chest. We're just going to be using one thin long strip of Velcro in place of those buttons, much like what you would see on an ACU style uniform. And something to note is that I usually put the hook style Velcro on the pocket itself, and then the soft loop style Velcro goes on the flap. The reason for this is because it will snag less on things that are coming in and out of your pocket, as well as your soft gloves. And of course, you're going to repeat the process for both of the bottom bigger pockets. Next, we're going to add the Velcro to the smaller chest pockets that are now going to become the shoulder pockets. And here I'm putting a small little piece of loop Velcro in between the buttonholes on the top flap, and then the bottom pocket is going to get the hook Velcro that's going to be about double the length of that loop Velcro. Now, unlike the previous bigger pockets, I'm actually going to sew the loop Velcro onto the buttonhole flap in order to preserve it. That way we can still use the buttons and buttonholes after the pocket is finished. I'll talk about that more later when I go over my finished examples. Next up, we're going to be adding loop panel to the outside of the shoulder pockets. This is going to hold all of your cool guy morale patches, American flags, and IR indicators. So for this example, I did have to disassemble the flap in order to get this loop panel on here. Now, I know it looks intimidating, but if you try to cheat it and finagle and contort the flap around to get the needle in there, you're just gonna be punching a lot of air. You're gonna save yourself a lot of time, energy, and hatred by just disassembling the flap, remembering how to sew it back together, and getting a nice, beautiful piece of loop panel on that flap. And now, once you repeat that process with the other shoulder pocket, you now have all 4 pockets finished and ready to go on the jacket. And honestly, that was the hard part, so take a break and reward yourself. So we're actually going to be attaching the pockets to the jacket itself, alright? So we're going to start with the chest pockets, or what were formerly the larger bottom pockets. So we can have this pocket at a few different angles. We can have it completely facing inwards, kind of like an ACU style jacket. We can have it facing a little bit inwards, like a Crye style field top, or a little bit outwards, kind of like a Beyond Clothing Level 9. Also, you want to make sure that you don't accidentally sew up the bellows on the sides of the pockets, because then they won't be able to expand when you put stuff inside of them. And then you're going to repeat that on both sides, and then you're going to add on the top flaps. And you want to have the top flaps sewn on exactly how they were before. You're going to have 2 rows of stitching, and you want to keep that same kind of a distance between the pocket and that flap. Once I'm done attaching both of the chest pockets, I'll move up to the shoulder pockets. The shoulder pockets are a lot harder, especially the left side pen pocket. Now, I like to put the shoulder pockets at a little bit of a forward angle, and I like to align it using the seam at the top of the shoulder and then the seam at the back of the arm. Once I figure out my angle that I want for the pocket, I'll then throw the little pen holder on the inside, and then I'll start with that, because if you sew the pocket on first before the pen holder, you're not going to be able to sew that pen holder on, so it's got to come before the actual pocket. Now again, by using a combination of sewing adhesive as well as pins, you're going to have to get the sleeve of that jacket into your machine somehow without getting any overlapping fabric, and then sewing the jacket to itself, which is a huge pain in the butt. So this takes a lot of finagling and patience and bleeding. So you just got to work through it, just take it slow, and you'll get through it. Now, much like the top flap of the shoulder pocket, it would be a better idea to open up the sleeve from the seam in the back, but over time I've gotten pretty good at just being able to work the material around the needle and get that thing on without having to open up the sleeve. Now, once that little pen pocket is on there, it's time to lay the actual main pocket over the top of it. And once I got it on there, I'll spray some adhesive on there just to keep it in place. I'll pin it really well, because now we're gonna have to do the same thing for this entire pocket as well as the flap. And the thing about my sewing machine is, because it has that sort of table design in the center there, I do have to pull the sleeve over it, and it doesn't allow me to twist the sleeve around to sew on this square pocket very well. So it does just take a lot of checking and rechecking to make sure that fabric is not overlapping and you're not sewing the sleeve to itself, because, well, then you're gonna have to start all over and rip a lot of seams. So if you're just patient and you just check your work and you have the thing pinned on there really well, then you'll be okay. And lastly, for sewing on the flaps, do make sure that you leave that opening on the pen pocket so that the pen or pencil can come through the top. That's a mistake that I've made plenty of times. So just make sure that you leave a gap and then bar tack in between the space. And then of course, for the other shoulder pocket that doesn't have the pen holder, it's just going to be a straight line all the way across. So once you got those final flaps on there, that's really about it. So let's go ahead and take a look at some of my finished examples.
So let's start with my version 1. This is just a standard issue BDU coat. It's the hot weather version, the 50/50 nylon cotton version. And actually a lot of the inspiration for this raid mod that I did is actually the Patagonia Level 9 field top, right? And you can see here that I have same side access chest pockets, much like the Patagonia Level 9. But I do like the same side access because I thought, you know, it might be really easy to access things in the chest pocket if I'm wearing something like a chest rig, right? And that was a little hopeful. I tried it out, it didn't really work too well in actuality. So let's move on over to the shoulder pockets. Now the first thing you'll notice is that it's actually pretty straight up and down, right? I saw with some of the older BDU raid mods, they are very vertical. And I think the reason for that is because of some old SOPs. I'm pretty sure some higher up was like, okay, yeah, you can modify your jacket, but your patches better be straight up and down like when you sew them on. So the pockets were also straight up and down, right? And that isn't great because it does not make them very easy to access, right? It's not at a very natural angle, but it does look pretty cool. It's pretty cool old school throwback. But you'll see here that I actually, not only do I have Velcro on here, but I also maintained the buttonholes and buttons. And the reason for that is not only can I get extra retention here by using those buttons, that way if I'm taking on or off a pack, it's not gonna rip open that pocket and then I'm gonna have a fire sale everywhere, lose all my precious notes and calculator or whatever. But also I can take a piece of tape or some single-sided Velcro, I can silence that Velcro and then make it only rely on those buttons, and now it's a silent opening and closing, right? So across all of the coats that I've made, I always put this left chest pocket that uses the pen holder on my left shoulder, just so that I can keep everything pretty standard. I always know that my Right in the Rain and my pen are going to be in this pocket. Now, looking at the outside of the pocket, I do have just a single piece of loop panel here that is actually cut to size to be just big enough for an American flag patch. And the thought process there is that I really want to maintain the camo pattern of the coat, right? I don't want to take away from it too much by putting on a bunch of, you know, flat colored loop panel. And I really don't plan on putting, you know, a bunch of morale patches on a field jacket, right? I want to keep this thing as camoed as possible, right? So I figured I would have just enough loop panel to have IR patches and American flags because, well, I love America and I hope you do too. And here on the cuffs, you can see I still have those 3 buttons on there, but I actually updated that in my later models. So that's my version 1. I think we should move over to my version 2 and see what I changed. All right, so next let's look at my version 2. Now my version 2, as you can tell, is a DCU desert jacket. And in terms of material, this is identical to my woodland hot weather coat, right? The only difference is that this one actually has the old school Elvis collar, and I think you can tell why they call it the Elvis collar. I think it's a total early GWOT vibe. I think it's a cool throwback, so that's why I went with this one. But functionally, it is identical, right? Same 4-pocket design. There's no changes across that, right? So what did I do different with this one? Well, firstly, you can tell that the chest pockets have been canted inwards. That way it is going to be more of a cross draw than a same side access. And I just found that the flaps on the chest are a little bit more comfortable underneath a plate carrier when they're facing, you know, inwards instead of outwards, right? Now with this one, I actually have like an ACU style Velcro here. It's just one long thin strip. Now I think that this long strip design gives you a really good seal, make sure that things aren't going to fall out. The other biggest difference is that I added Velcro to the cuffs. Now this is great because not only is it quicker and easier for me to do, especially with gloves on, but it also gives me a much better seal from the elements, right? So if I'm doing yard work or I'm bushwhacking, I really don't want to get poison ivy on my wrists, or if I really don't want some creatures crawling up my arms while I'm taking a nap against a tree, then this is something that I can do, right? But if it's just so super hot and it is just too hot to be sealing up my arms like that, and I just want to let my wrists breathe and cool down a bit, it's very easy for me to just roll my sleeves up and then Velcro them down like this. So the next biggest difference is going to be that I have canted the pockets at a much more natural angle, right? So this way I can just get in there much more easily. Where the hell did I put my Right in the Rain? So that way something like my Right in the Rain is gonna come in and out much more easily. And then of course, like I do with all of mine, I maintained that pen pocket. It's still got that little holder on the inside there, make sure it doesn't move around. I also maintain that little opening here at the top. And as you can see, once again, I still just have a single piece of loop panel up on the flap that's just big enough, once again, for an American flag. And the right side pocket is still just a pocket, nothing really special over there. So that is my version 2 and my one and only Raid modded DCU coat. So let's move on to my version 3. That one's just a little bit different, but not so much, but it's still cool. So this is my version 3. Now it's not super interesting. It's not really anything you haven't seen before. I really just wanted to have another go at a woodland top and update my version 1 a little bit. And I think that this is definitely an improvement over that first one that I did, all right? So much like the DCU coat, we see that I have those ACU style Velcro here on the chest. They are facing at a cross draw angle. Velcro on the cuffs, once again, unlike my version 1. The pockets, you can see those are still at a pretty aggressive angle. It's a lot more natural. Again, I've maintained the buttons on here for retention or being able to silence them. Really the only difference here between the version 2 and my version 3 is going to be the loop panel, right? So I just wanted to play around with it a little bit, play with some different styles. And much like with the version 1, where I think that they had SOPs where those flags had to be straight up and down, once they did start to angle them at a more natural angle, I did see that they were still maintaining that parallel flag kind of design, right? And yeah, so that's basically what it looks like in some reference photos that I've seen. The only difference is that I did add a little square loop panel up here, and that's something that I kind of copied from the Marine Corps' frog tops, right? The frog combat shirts. I think it is a cool little place to put those little IR Velcro tabs, right? So next up is my version 4, and there are some pretty big differences there. It's a little bit more interesting. So let's go check that out now. So here we have my version 4. Now this is the most recent raid mod that I did for myself, and it's a much bigger deviation from what I've previously done, right? So this is much less of a field top and much more of a combat top, right? Now, when I say combat shirt, you're probably imagining something like this, something that has the reinforced sleeves with the jersey knit material on the body. Now, outside of being used with a plate carrier, this thing doesn't really have too much utility. So that's why I love something more like a BDU or a raid mod top. I'm not gonna get too deep into the why the field jacket is superior to the combat shirt, because Spirited Systems actually already did a really awesome video on that. But what I will say is that if you watch my PCU or my level 4 wind shirt video, you'll know that something like a BDU or field jacket is going to be able to layer a lot better than something like a combat shirt. So that's another reason why I really like those. Now, this is really more indicative of something like the Army's new OCP hot weather coats, where they don't have pockets on the chest just to keep them more breathable. So by omitting those chest pockets, the chest is going to be a lot more comfortable underneath a plate carrier, a lot more breathable. So that's what I had in mind here. And then you can also see that with the loop panel up on the shoulder pockets, it really has more of that like Cry Combat top type of a style, right? So don't really care about the camo so much with this. I really just want it to be comfy under a plate carrier, be able to hold all of my, cool guy patches and identifiers, right? And yeah, so I'm a big fan of this one. I think it's definitely cool, right? And like I said before, head on over to venturesurplus.com. Pick up a bunch of these. That's the coolest part, is that instead of buying one super expensive, super specialized, or extremely general piece of clothing, you can just have a bunch of these for a bunch of different use cases, right? So that's my favorite part. It's really cool being able to just, play around with it, have a little bit of fun, right? And the other thing about having so many different versions and having a few tricks up my sleeve is that if my friends want me to do something for them, I can do a few different styles depending on what it is that they need. So let's look at one of my buddies' tops that I did. and see what he wanted there and how it worked out for him. So here's a coat that I finished for a good buddy of mine. This is really nothing special. It's just a 100% cotton, proper BDU coat in Desert Tiger stripe, right? But after just a little bit of time, energy, and some thread, I mean, it becomes something that looks really valuable, right? And I'm really happy with how this came out, and so is he, right? And the coolest part about it was being able to work with him to figure out what is going to work best, right? So after completing about 4 of my own variations of a raid mod, I was able to suggest things to him, like how he wants the loop panels, what angle he wants the shoulder pockets at, right? Whether he wants the pockets to be same side access or to be a cross draw, right? And you know, he's a lot bigger than I am, if you couldn't tell. And it's actually easier for him to use a same side access than to do a cross draw, right? And that was a really cool thing that I was able to figure out with him and personalize for him. So this is not just some standard issue thing. This is not just something that he picked up. This is something that was actually tailored to him and his own body mechanics, right? So thank you guys so much for watching. I hope you found this interesting. I had a lot of fun. I spent a lot of time making this video. Making those modifications to a pre-existing piece of clothing is just not the easiest thing in the world. But I really thought that it was an interesting topic, and I really want to try to encourage people to be a little more self-sufficient and do things themselves, right? So with that being said, I want to give back to you guys a little bit. So if this video hits 5,000 views, I will do a free, custom, personalized raid mod for one person who comments on this video, right? I'll choose them randomly once we hit 5,000 views, and I just want to give back to you a little bit, right? Free of charge, because I wouldn't charge you for my amateur skills, right? But I think it'll be cool. And the other thing is, I want to see what you guys can do, especially for you amateurs out there, or people who are at any skill level. I want to see what you guys can do, all right? So go over to Instagram, tag me in whatever project you got going on, finished, in progress, doesn't matter. And I'll be reposting those to my story, because I think it'd be really cool to just be able to inspire each other and show what one person with a sewing machine and a dream can do. All right, so thank you guys again for watching. Thank you so much, Venture Surplus, for sponsoring this video. Head on over there, discount code KitCreep, and have a good summer.